Welcome everyone to the Canadian Science Policy Pre-Conference Sections 2023. My name is Angeli Vasquez and I'm volunteering the events in CSPC. Before I begin this section, I want to introduce I want to do the land acknowledgement from where I am today. Montreal is on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence mark this territory on which peoples of the world gather today. So today we have short talks, 7, of a range of interesting subjects and accomplished speakers. Each talk will be around 8 minutes of presentation, followed by 2-3 minutes of questions. We request you to submit your questions to the Q&A button on your Zoom screen. We also will launch a poll through this section for you to answer. So for beginning today, we have our first speaker, Pierre-Olivier Demarche. His talk is titled Biodigital Today and Tomorrow. Mr. Demarche is the Senior Foresight Analyst from Policy Horizons Canada. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. I will now share my screen. Okay, so you should see it. Bonjour, hi. Thank you very much for joining. Also would like to thank the organizers of this conference for the great opportunity today to present Policy Horizons Foresight Study on the biodigital convergence. You may ask yourself, what does this biodigital convergence mean? Is it a new thing? Where is it coming from? Well, about 4 years ago, Policy Horizons started examining what we call the biodigital convergence. At that time, we saw biological and digital technologies, two domains that traditionally are thought of as separate, starting to converge across a variety of sectors and activities. Simply put, the biodigital convergence is the interactive combination, and to some extent, the merging of biology and digital systems that may lead to new knowledge, technologies, and application. From a foresight perspective, we were interested by the implication, including challenges and opportunities, of the convergence and how it could disrupt the economy, the society, the environment, and of course, policies over the next 15 years. Over the course of our foresight project, we've identified 5 sectors that we believe could be the most impacted by biodigital innovation. They are manufacturing, health, food, environment, and security. I will highlight some of the implication and uncertainties the biodigital convergence could have on the manufacturing, health, and security sectors. Today, more than 40 countries have adopted a national bioeconomy strategy. And among the key sectors identified in most of these strategies, we can find synthetic biology or genetic engineering as being strategic to ensure competitiveness from a scientific and economic point of view. We have identified biofoundries or genome foundries as a driver of change that could have significant impacts on many industrial and manufacturing sectors. Biofoundries are smart and automated multidisciplinary research labs that use big data, artificial intelligence, robotics, bioengineering software, and genomic expertise to craft a specialized genetically modified organisms for industrial bioprocesses. Today, biofoundries are already at work to develop bio-alternatives to natural resources, agricultural products, and petrochemicals. Normally, each economic sector has developed its own technologies, but a bioeconomy supported by biofoundries and synthetic biology could have a very broad reach and disrupt several sectors at once. International trade and supply chain. What is important to understand is that as a biological construction platforms, a large part of the economic value of the bioeconomy in the future could lie in the optimization of the technologies used within biofoundry. A small number of companies or organizations owning these biofoundries could thus compete with sector-based companies. In terms of health, so the biodigital convergence has the potential to facilitate the shift to P4 medicines, which means that is predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory. Some of these shifts that we are seeing today are synthetic organs and digital implants. Because of advancement in both 3D printing and tissue engineering, we are able to bioprint functional organs tissue that soon may become full organs for transplant. The first therapeutic digital implants that use deep brain stimulation can correct neurological disorders like Parkinson's or depression. In addition to digital implants, health data collection has been accelerated with health applications, smartphones, direct-to-consumer DNA testing, and wearable. This has created an opportunity for artificial intelligence algorithms to work as diagnostic and prevention tools. AI can track moods and mental health by analyzing our voice and facial expression. For example, an application is able to identify over 300 rare diseases from a child's face. Imagine the number of conditions artificial intelligence may be able to identify in 15 years. Biodigital innovation in healthcare may raise a number of challenges and opportunities in terms of privacy, socioeconomic equity, intellectual property, in the pursuit of universal well-being. Several biodigital innovation create new tools that could modify surveillance technique, optimize criminal investigation, and ultimately be used to develop new biological weapons. Biological data is now more accessible. The declining cost of DNA sequencing over the past 20 years has enabled private and public organizations to create biological database. At the same time, platforms have appeared on the internet that allow users to upload their genetic profile in order to obtain information on their ancestors and their health. But what is the value of these biological databases, especially in terms of national security? Sequencing database from the private and public sectors could be targeted by cyber hackers in order to steal genetic profiles. The information could provide a comparative advantage in markets like healthcare in other countries or foreign organizations, but also be used to do and fuel R&D on bioweapons, could target specific groups. Biological data is already being used by the police, which raise several questions in terms of security. We have seen judges order private companies that host these biodatabases to give access to law enforcement authorities in order to solve unsolved crimes. Even if biodigital innovation holds great promise for stopping incurable disease, preventing the next pandemic, or eliminating invasive species from our ecosystem, they raise several concerns from the point of view of their dual use. For instance, CRISPR genome editing technology or synthetic biology could be used in the development of new viruses and thus serve as a biological weapon. Are security services able to detect the signature of genetically modified pathogens in order to learn a little bit more about the origin of the attack? What kind of regulatory framework could govern the collection, the assessment or analysis, and the storage of DNA data? Will the companies who collect and store data be allowed to move it from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and to different data centers? Okay. So in conclusion, we are at the beginning of the biodigital convergence era. The merging of digital technology and biological system is called upon to disrupt several sectors, including health, to modify our production and consumption mode as well as our environment. While pushing the limits of our ability to understand and control biological entities, the convergence notably promised to strengthen our food security, reduce the carbon footprint of our economies, provide new treatments for incurable disease, and increase and improve our life expectancy. But despite all these benefits, it imposed new challenges in terms of privacy and cybersecurity. With the explosion and digitization of biological data, could disrupt international trade and rural economies with the emergence of bio-alternative from local and urban bioproduction. It will force governments to manage the risk and scientific uncertainties of releasing genetically modified organisms into the environment for economic, health, or conservation reasons. In terms of social cohesion, biodigital convergence could fuel fake news and polarization. And finally, in terms of ethics, it may raise the greatest debate of the 21st century on the modification of the human genomes in future generations. By thinking deeply about this convergence, assessing the risk, but also the opportunities, this could allow governments to be better prepared for the biodigital era. Thank you. I hope I'm on time. So.
Thank you so much for your talk. And we still don't have questions from the audience, but we invite them to submit them if there are some questions. Okay, seems it's fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving to our second speakers of the day, Dr. Alison Seckler and Dr. Michael Sherbrooke. They are going to talk about developing a vision for the future of health research in Canada, recommendations from HealthCareCAN members across Canada. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having us. I'm Alison Seckler. I'm the President and Chief Scientist at the Baycrest Academy for Research and Education, as well as President and Chief Scientist at the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation.
And I'm Michael Schubert. I'm the Executive Director of Research at St. Barnabas Hospital in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Welcome. Today we'll be talking about a vision for the future of healthcare, health research in Canada from HealthCareCAN. And by way of introduction, HealthCareCAN is the national advocate for healthcare organizations and hospitals in Canada. We facilitate innovation and transformation within the healthcare system and represent over 600,000 employees, 8,000 scientists, 60,000 research staff and students, and 45,000 volunteers in the healthcare setting. The Vice Presidents of Health Research Committee, to which both Alison and I belong, is comprised of experts from leading healthcare institutions across the country. We play a pivotal role in shaping the future of health research in Canada. We contribute both as researchers and administrators. Many of us wear dual hats and continue to do our own research in the field. We also try to bring insights on policy matters related to health research, innovation, commercialization. Our network spans over 50 vice presidents of research across the country, and we advocate at the federal level for policies and initiatives that promote cutting-edge research and innovative healthcare solutions, all aimed at ultimately improving the healthcare and well-being of Canadians.
Our members are the leaders of change in the healthcare system, and they are hospitals and healthcare organizations across the country whose mandates demand excellence. And from their research successes, they change how we prevent, detect, and treat disease and illness. Through their innovative practices, they improve how we care for patients, and through their highly trained and skilled staff, they teach us how to stay healthy. Health research and innovation play a crucial role in reshaping and improving our healthcare system. They address pressing challenges such as the impact of climate change and the needs of Canada's aging population. And by fostering innovation, they create new medical technologies, and they also contribute to economic growth. Additionally, they strengthen Canada's scientific reputation through global collaborations and partnerships. And it's really critical to understand that the work of the hospital-linked research institutes is distinct from research in universities or colleges and offers a unique perspective. Research hospitals provide care for the most rare and complex conditions. They educate future healthcare providers, and they move research results into practice.
We know that investment in research turns around and provides funding back to the country and economic growth. A recent study in the UK taken by the National Health Service Confederation found that for every pound that was invested in research or spent on research at the NHS, there was a corresponding return on investment of £4. And I think the numbers would be very similar for Canada. A recent example of where we can really see the incredible difference that research in healthcare institutions can drive knowledge forward is in the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. This was made possible through the early work of Canadian researcher Dr. Peter Cullis, and really paved the groundwork for mRNA-based vaccines, which we saw were rapidly developed during the recent COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, one of the issues was that once we developed those vaccines, they were not being manufactured in Canada. And so there is a risk here. And in fact, this is an important opportunity for us to turn things around. The COVID vaccine a vaccination program in the United States alone prevented more than 18.5 million additional hospitalizations, and is estimated to have prevented 3.2 million deaths. HealthCareCAN plays a pivotal role in advocating for health research and innovation in Canada. One of the challenges in front of us is that Canada's R&D investment, as you can see, lags behind the OECD nations by quite a substantial margin. This actually leads to the risk of a brain drain. In fact, when we talk about brain drain, this is not something that is going to be happening. It's something that is happening now and has been happening for a number of years. Over the last decade or plus, while Canada's investment in research as a percentage of total R&D spending has gone down, it has actually gone up in countries like the UK, Australia, and the United States. The risks of this is that we start to spend money on training students, for example, but those students don't end up pursuing careers in Canada. They go to other countries. We run the risk of losing researchers to other countries. We see that our opportunity to staff biotech firms that we're trying to attract to the country starts to go down as the number of people available to take those positions go elsewhere. We also see there's a potential risk of loss of intellectual property and commercialization options that then get taken overseas. And we see a negative impact on innovation because when funding starts to become contracted and difficult to gain, higher risk, higher reward research starts to fall by the wayside.
So in keeping with everything that Mike's been talking about, HealthCareCAN's recommendations align with our ongoing advocacy and focus on 4 key areas: investing in health research and innovation, supporting graduate and postdoctoral students, supporting Canada's healthcare workers, and modernizing Canada's health system. And we're proud of the leadership role that HealthCareCAN has taken in providing recommendations for the federal research support system, which was detailed in the advisory panel report published in March. HealthCareCAN's submission underscores the importance of increasing funding and support for health research in Canada while emphasizing the necessity of collaboration and partnership among researchers, nonprofits, industry, and government stakeholders.
Our advisory panel report statement is available on the HealthCareCAN website at www.healthcarecan.ca. We also collaborate with the Standing Committee on Science and Research to shape the future of health research and advocate for increased funding to support cutting-edge research initiatives. We advocate for important initiatives such as federal graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowship programs, and our efforts also encompass a comprehensive proposal aimed at improving the funding frameworks for graduate students and postdoc fellows engaged in research across the country.
And just to be a little bit more specific, our key HealthCareCAN recommendations in the 2024 pre-budget submission are to double the current funding to Tri-Council and commit to an annual increase that keeps pace with inflation and global benchmarks to ensure competitive and sustainable research funding. And we also aim to increase federal funding that's available through the Tri-Council to graduate scholarships and postdoctoral fellowships, tying funding levels to increases in inflation and to increases in the overall number of scholarships and fellowships available by 50%, adjusting annually to reflect the level of enrollment in graduate and postdoctoral programs.
Collectively, the elements of a national vision include investing in a knowledge resource economy. So looking at knowledge and discovery as not simply something that we spend money on, but really something that we invest in order to drive economic returns to the country. This vision would also support scientists and develop future researchers, and those really go hand in hand. If we are going to support students, it's not sufficient to simply provide additional scholarships and postdoctoral funding. Those individuals need a lab, a clinic, a facility to work in, and they need a project to work on that is funded, and that requires supporting the scientists that run those laboratories as well. Our investments in health research are critical for enhancing the health and overall quality of life of Canadians, and they solidify our global standing as a leader in research and innovation. And Canada does do extremely well in that area, but we do risk this by the net reduction we've seen overall compared to our peers in other countries. And as a result, we run the risk that the investment being made in those countries will start to widen the gap between us and what they're doing over there. These investments offer a substantial return on investment, serving as a catalyst for researchers to innovate and collaborate, ultimately leading to a richer knowledge pool. And furthermore, there's a greater commitment to healthcare investment, which has a positive effect on long-term economic growth and the quality of healthcare services that are provided.
And of course, scientists are pivotal to advancing knowledge and effectively translating research into practical applications within healthcare. And it's essential to provide the necessary support and resources for scientists working within hospital research institutes to foster their work effectively. So to cultivate a community of world-class scientists, there needs to be a focus on attracting, training, and retaining the best individuals in the field. And it's also important to note that many of Canada's trainees rely on Tri-Council grants for funding. And that number of trainees has grown and the cost of living has increased dramatically, but Tri-Council funding has remained at a standstill. So HealthCareCAN's call to double federal funding for Tri-Council, along with annual increases that align with international benchmarks, is essential to ensure the continued growth and development of our scientific talent pool and the continued impact of that research.
And the images on this slide represent just a tiny slice of the kinds of innovative companies that can arise from investments over time at our healthcare and hospital-based research centers. One of these, for example, the winner of the Governor General's Innovation Award in 2016 is the NeuroBlade system from Monteris, shown in the middle image here. This is a medical device that combines a novel laser probe system with real-time image guidance. And using MRI and sophisticated software, the tool allows neurosurgeons in Canada and abroad to treat brain tumors and other intracranial targets in a minimally invasive way that also reduces post-op care and health costs. Cognicity is a brain health company created by Baycrest that is changing the way the world looks at brain health and aging. Through the provision of innovative evidence-based brain health solutions, Cognicity is engaging older adults in important conversations about their brain health, working to improve the quality of life of individuals living with dementia, and supporting research efforts to prevent, treat, and cure dementia. And Winsantor is a company working to prevent and reverse nerve damage associated with peripheral neuropathy through the repair and regrowth of peripheral nerves in diabetics. Their results validate the discovery of a pathway to regenerate peripheral nerves and reduce symptoms associated with peripheral nerve damage. And again, this kind of work is being done at centers across the country. We just need the investment to make these happen.
So in collaboration with HealthCareCAN members across Canada and key stakeholders, HealthCareCAN continues to advocate with elected representatives on behalf of Canada's healthcare organizations to shape the future of health research. We're pleased to collaborate with stakeholders within the healthcare ecosystem. And if you're interested in collaborating with us, please reach out to Jonathan Mitchell, Vice President, Research and Policy, HealthCareCAN, at jmitchell@healthcarecan.ca. Thank you very much.
Yes, our researchers want to help. We want to improve the research ecosystem to benefit all Canadians, our health, our healthcare system, and our economy. And so, as Allison said, please reach out to us. We're always looking for additional partners and advocates. So thank you very much. We will close our session there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seckler and Dr. Sherbrooke. We have one question on the audience. How do you explain the low funding in health research?
I'll start and then Mike can maybe chime in. I think that the low funding in health research stems in part from people not understanding that research is happening in the hospitals and in the hospital-linked research institutes. I think that when they think of hospitals and they think of healthcare, they think of the provision of care. They don't realize that there's so much work that goes into the creation of new approaches to care, as well as the research that drives the prevention of disease in the first place, as well as early detection. So I think increasing the understanding of how that whole research to impact sort of stream works is really critical for us to be able to raise awareness so that we can increase the funding. Mike, I don't know if you've anything you'd want to add on that.
I don't have much to add, really. It's a great question because there's long been this idea that research eventually delivers discoveries that can help. But in fact, we know that there's a lot of research going on now that will deliver in the short term and in the long term. There's economic spin-off benefits. As we appreciate the impact that research has on our economy, I think it's a great time to talk about the nature of the investment that Canada makes in our ecosystem, and looking at our peers and seeing, how they're increasing their investments shows us they see something that we need to get on board with in terms of the way we fund research in this country.
Thank you.
All right, I'll stop sharing here.
Yes, thank you. So we will move to our third speaker for today. Is Miss Jenny Cleaver. She's not with us. She had recorded her talk, which is titled An Interdisciplinary Approach to Science Communication Towards More Inclusive and Contextual Communication Practices. Mr. Cleaver is a PhD student at the School of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University. We cannot hear.
The audio is muted.
Is it still muted? We can do a last try and see if maybe that works. Sorry, everyone.
Contribute to the conversation. I am so.
It's working now, Trudy.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to the organizers of the Canadian Science Policy Conference this year for having me on this panel. I'm very excited to be able to contribute to the conversation. I am sorry I can't be there live to present today, as I had a scheduling conflict I was unable to resolve. But I will be providing my email address at the end of my presentation, so if there are any comments or questions, I'll be more than happy to receive them via email. So my presentation today is entitled An Interdisciplinary Approach to Science Communication Towards More Inclusive and Contextual Communication Practices. And this work is based on my research in science communication as a PhD student in the School of Journalism and Communication at Carleton University. And one of the current focus areas in my research is to think about the effectiveness of science communication practices, whether at the level of research institutes, government, or individual scientists or science communicators, and essentially explore whether there is room for something more, something new. And this is especially relevant today as we are in a cultural moment where the COVID-19 pandemic has made science and its inherent uncertainties hyper-visible. And at the same time, marches for science in recent years have emphasized the importance of science in our daily lives and have called for more evidence-based policy decisions. It is important then to ask critical questions around how the public perceives science and what effective science communication might look like today. So to set the premise here a little bit, within the scientific community and among science communicators and science journalists today, there's a push to present accessible and accurate information to improve science literacy and to empower individuals to make informed decisions that impact their health and well-being and that of their families and communities. And we can see that, for example, in mandates such as this one from the World Health Organization's Strategic Communications Framework. And this states the goal of providing information, advice, and guidance to decision makers These include key audiences, which could range from those developing science policy to citizens making decisions about their personal health, for example. And that's to prompt action that will protect the health of individuals, families, communities, and nations. However, we continue to have widespread mistrust in science, both in Canada and globally, and the spreading of mis and disinformation, faster than it can be addressed. And I've got a few stats here up on the slide for context from the Pew Research Center. So the question then becomes, what is to be done? And what my work does is look at this question by first asking how science is understood and perceived by the public and what assumptions we continue to hold about science that may not be beneficial. And I do this by looking at scholarship about science from many different perspectives and disciplines. Science, after all, does not happen in a vacuum. It is embedded in social and cultural processes. So I look to science communication scholarships, such as work on the public understanding of science, but I also look to communication and media theory, feminist science studies, and Indigenous ways of knowing. And I'll present a little bit about how these three latter perspectives can help us think through science and effective science communication. So starting here with communication theory, the work by historian and social theorist John Durham Peters is a useful starting point for thinking about the objective of communicating. He argues in his book, Speaking into the Air, that this idea of perfect communication, and I'm putting that in quotes, does not exist. In other words, there is no way to achieve communication that relays the exact meaning we intend in the exact way we intend it to. There's always noise, there are always many different interpretations, and there are often communication breakdowns. And he argues that instead, these breakdowns and misunderstandings could be the beginning of something meaningful. That differences are important and that they make it possible to build worlds and relationships. He writes, and I've got this quote up on the screen, "It is the moment of interruption, disruption, breakdown, where connections begin, where the invisible becomes visible and wherefrom reflection sprouts." So the question here then is, what would the process of developing science communication look like if we took this seriously? Might we lean more into the uncertainties in science? Might we meet any misunderstandings with more excitement and less frustration? Looking now to Black feminist science and society studies allows for a critical examination of science and scientific practices. So Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, in the book The Disordered Cosmos, calls for a more liberatory science, one which gives anyone the freedom to wonder about the night sky. And this includes considerations around privilege and exclusion. An example given in the book is that for folks living in big cities with a lot of light pollution, getting out into the country to see the night sky might not be possible. The emotional experience of seeing the Milky Way, then, is not accessible to all equally. And Prescott-Weinstein also emphasizes the importance of treating our environment and our world with respect and the need to decolonize science so that all may know science is for them. And the question then becomes, how might we rethink science communication if we start from the basis that science needs to be for everyone? This requires thinking deeply about privilege, access, infrastructure, as well as awe and wonder, and who these are accessible to. Finally, I turn to scholarship on Indigenous ways of knowing. And here my work is informed by Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who writes in her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, about Indigenous knowledge, science, and the environment. And she writes, there was a time when I teetered precariously with an awkward foot in each of the two worlds, the scientific and the Indigenous. But then I learned to fly, or at least try. It was the bees that showed me how to move between different flowers, to drink the nectar and gather pollen from both. It is this dance of cross-pollination that can produce a new species of knowledge, a new way of being in the world. And this is an important theorization of how Western science and Indigenous ways of knowing could come together to build something new. And so this brings up the question of what might this new thing look like? And would it foster more connection to the environment and to one another? So I'll finish here by saying that what I've shown here today is brief, and it's just a very small subset of the literature that my research engages with. So with only three perspectives from three scholars, we already see that a number of important questions about science and science communication are opened up. An interdisciplinary approach is key to better understanding what assumptions we hold about science, how science is embedded in the social and the cultural, and what kinds of questions could lead us to science communication practices that leave more room for understanding and inclusivity, for connection and for wonder. And so my ongoing work will bring even more perspectives together around this topic and will eventually hopefully lead to some practical recommendations for effective science communication in our cultural moment. But my point here really is to show that an interdisciplinary approach can open up questions that we wouldn't have asked before, and that is a very important and powerful thing. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I am sorry once again I'm not there live, but please feel free to send any comments or questions to my email, which is up on my slide here, and I'll be happy to receive them. Thank you.
So we thank Ms. Cleaver for her presentation, and we go to our next one, which is Ms. Erica Liu, a PhD student in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program at the University of Calgary. She's going to talk about autism in work teams, the role of organizations, leaders, and team members in a neurodiverse teamwork. Welcome.
Thank you, Angeli. I just want to confirm that my screen is being shared okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll be talking about the experiences of autism in work teams. And so my project here is a culmination of a scope and review of about 29 articles, as well as engagement with autistic individuals. And so really the goal here was to get essentially to start at step 0, if you will, for a future program of research. And so integrating fairly disparate realms of research around medicine, psychology, the disability study realm, also some management studies and vocational rehab as well. And so I'll take you through some of the findings of the study and some of the questions I had and some general background on this topic. And so when we think about autism spectrum disorder, I think now more than ever, the conversation is starting to shift, but certainly we still do have biases on what this might look like. And by definition, according to the American Psychological Association, it's defined by 3 characteristics. And so one, differences in social interaction and interpersonal communication, 2, restrictive interests, and 3, repetitive behaviors. I want to highlight where the literature has come, where it currently stands. And so what I'll talk briefly about is the difference between the disability and social models of disability, or the medical versus social model of disability. And so in the medical model, we consider disabilities as conditions that are deficient. It looks at what's lacking, what's wrong with the individual. And certainly there is a large bulk of literature in the autism research that looks at it from that perspective. Lots of developmental studies, child development studies that examine this as well. But when we consider the social model, it views the individual as whole, autistic or not, and acknowledges the characteristics as simply natural differences that occur across individuals, naturally occurring differences. And so in the social model, which is the lens that I took in my evaluation of the 29 studies, we think about the person in the context in which they live and work. And so coming from organizational psychology, my questions tend to focus around how teams function, how teams work, and what the outcomes are for individuals at work. I want to bring your attention to this article in particular. It's a highly cited one from in Harvard Business Review, and I'll just read a couple of sentences from here. And I'm pointing this out because it's fairly stereotypical They don't acknowledge it as that, but it promotes a specific view of autism that I'd like to challenge. So meet John. He's a wizard at data analytics. His combination of math ability and software development skills is very unusual. He is highly accomplished, has 2 master's degrees, both with honors. So he's an obvious guy to scoop up from a tech company, right? Except no. I'll skip down to the bottom. If you watch John for a while, you'll start to see why. He seems different. He wears headphones all the time, and when people talk to him, he doesn't look at them. He leans over every 10 minutes or so to tighten his shoelaces. So this is kind of just a snapshot here of what a person's perception of an autistic individual might look like in the workplace. So I'll bring your attention next to what's referred to as Generation A. And so there is an expected uptick. They call it a growth of about 200% over the next 10 years of autistic individuals reaching employment age. So what does this mean? It means that in about 10 years' time, there's going to be a high representation of autistic people in the workplace. And yet the current stats show that there is a high rate of unemployment and certainly underemployment. People are underutilized in their current roles. And even across all disability categories, autistic individuals are the least, have the lowest rate of employment. So it's a problem. But what does the literature say about this? Much of the research has been around how do we get autistic individuals to learn interview skills, to learn basic interpersonal skills, which is fine. But as we know, autism is on a spectrum, which means there is a bulk of people who already have these basic skills, who already have the professional designations and training, and who are already working in high-performing teams. But there is not much that's known about this. So that's what I wanted to explore. And I did, in my scope and review, consult with autistic individuals. I surveyed 39 and received some written feedback as well. And so from the individual responses from autistic people, as well as the 29 articles, I came up with some themes that can sort of generalize where the state of literature is at. And I want to bring your attention to 2 things. First, what's called the autism advantage, and secondly, the issue of disclosure in the workplace. The autism advantage is purported to be something that a competitive advantage that autistic folks bring to the workplace. These are sort of so-called genius level people who are rainmakers, and I'm using my fingers as quotes an example because, again, these are stereotypes. But if we ask the individuals themselves, they've described themselves as honest, as having the ability to notice patterns, identifying sources of error, not complying with norms, which can also lead to innovation. But on the flip side, they are masking 24 hours a day, and it's exhausting. They don't feel emotional or psychologically safe in the workplaces. They are feeling overstimulated, and they're not well understood. Disclosure, and of course, all of those were reflected in the literature as well. And same with the disclosure statements here that I found from individuals. Coworkers don't see you as a threat for being promoted because they perceive you as disabled. There's a lot to unpack in that statement themselves. Once people know, they act differently, and there's stigma. There's stigma of disclosing, and yet organizations are asking individuals with autism to please disclose so that they can be accommodated. So you can start to see where there's quite a bit of tension here and responsibility on the autistic individual to mask, to adapt to their neurotypical work environment, to disclose. But there's all of this backlash that can come at a risk towards their mental health, their well-being, even physical KPIs such as like blood pressure and sleep quality can start to be reduced because of this. And so what do we need to do? What are we looking what did we find from this review? Well, certainly that there's an ecosystem approach that's needed. So the onus is certainly not on the autistic individual. There is also a responsibility on team members as well as leaders in the organization. And disclosure specifically is something that is unique to teams that have autistic and non-autistic individuals or neurodiverse teams. neurotypical teams don't have to worry about disclosure or the stigma associated with disclosure. Leaders have to promote like psychological safety. They should be flexible. And something that not a lot of people like to talk about because it's not so interesting is having rules of engagement when working in teams or team norms. And organizations can do better by, of course, these are oversimplifications at this point, but by having written and clear accommodation processes. And that is my alarm to let me know that I am time's up. So in the future, I do want to model the very specific team processes. That's part of my background is team science. And so looking at what those processes look like and how neurodiverse teams, what they can leverage to sort of support their autistic team workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have a question from the audience. It says, what about telework?
What about telework? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was trying to write very quickly the question, but this is very interesting communication. Thank you very much. But what about what we all lived during the pandemic period? Is it helping those people to easier get integrated in our team or normal team, as I can say? I'm really sorry. I don't know how to ask a very clear question, but what about the telework?
Yeah, great question, and thank you for asking that. Unfortunately, it's a mixed bag. Okay, so in general, it is an advantage for autistic, neurodivergent, and other individuals with disability. I identify as a person with a disability, I have a vision disability, and so having that flexibility to engage in a way that they feel comfortable, preferring written communication, say, or preferring phone communication, that can support that versus the face-to-face interaction. Because of our work environment these days, there is kind of a greater need to have written, clear communication through email, etc. One thing I will point out is that a lot of the times when we are engaging in video conferencing, we like to show that we're engaged by turning our videos on. And this is incredibly exhausting for autistic individuals, exceptionally exhausting. So not only are you on camera, but you're masking for that entire time. So that can kind of reduce the cognitive load and ability to focus. And so one thing that I found in my research that I didn't include in the presentation is make it optional. So make it more inclusive by having cameras on as an optional thing. Don't make it mandatory. It doesn't always give the intent that we need. So that's hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we go to our next speaker, who was here already, Dr. Isabelle Lacroix. She's professor of applied politics affiliated with the Institut Quantique since 2019 and co-director of Impact Uses and Society Access and within the IQ at an international research laboratory, Laboratoire de Nanotechnologie et Nanosystem. She's going to talk about societal impacts of quantum technologies, a social dialogue of the heart of Sherbrooke's Innovation Zone. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And well, thank you to give me the opportunity to talk about this quite new research project about quantum technologies. I don't have any slides to show you, so you will have to listen to me. And first, I'd like to apologize for my my bad English. So I will be reading because we only have 8 minutes, and I don't want it to take like 15 minutes because I have problem with a lot of words. So right, our presentation today is about the social dialogue research project on the integration of quantum technologies in society, led by Professor Alexandre Blais, scientific director of the Quantum Institute at Université de Sherbrooke, and me, professor in the Faculty of Letters and Humanities at the same university. First revolution here, physics and social sciences working together. This project is funded by les Fonds de recherche du Québec Nature et Technologie for the next 3 years. So that's a very, very good news. We have 3 years to install and to create a real dialogue about integration of technologies. One of the most important aspects of this project is the implementation of a local dialogue surrounding the creation of the Sherbrooke Quantum Innovation Zone, launched in February 22 by the Quebec government. Quebec government created at that time 2 innovation zones, and one of them was in Quantum in Sherbrooke. Our basic observation leading to the creation of this research project 4 years ago was the fact that quantum technologies currently has few practical applications. The social, ethical, legal, and environmental parameters have yet to be developed and can play an important role in guiding research for responsible research and innovation in quantum technology. The benefits of this technology can only be fully realized with a true informed social acceptabilities. As we can see with the AI right now, we have work to do before this technology get integrated in society. Our project wants to reconcile the research community, the entrepreneurs, and the society in an integrated approach based on social dialogue, including all the actors concerned. That's where the fun is, based on the social dialogue at all stages, from ideation to integration in society, and on all fronts at the same time: research, development, integration, valorization, and training. The main objective of this research project is the implementation at the end of responsible technological development practices, which means considering all societal impacts based on collaborative research approaches, including the stakeholders. All the stakeholders that we in our research project, we talk about concerned actors. The development of a local research development society dialogue relies on the participation of all the actors involved in the innovation zone ecosystem. Anchored in a research action approach, the dialogue members will be invited to contribute to the creation of different scenarios of possible integration of the quantum technologies and its application in society. First result, it was surprisingly easy to gather partners for this project, as 14 local organizations in Sherbrooke agreed to send a representative or 2 to the dialogue meetings. The participating organizations are 4 companies: 1Qubit, IBM, Pascal, Quantaset, 3 educational organizations, including l'Université de Sherbrooke from the Sherbrooke region, le Cégep de Sherbrooke, college institution, and le Centre 24 Juin with secondary professional formation, I would say. Government organization, of course, the city of Sherbrooke, and district, who is the organization that lead the Sherbrooke Innovation Zone. And 5 groups of the civil society. So we have Sherbrooke Chamber of Commerce, Environment Regional Council from l'Estrie, the region of Sherbrooke, Museum of Nature and Science from Sherbrooke, the Pepin Group, who is a feminist group that work to get women in the decisional position, and Sporobol, who is a cultural organization. All those organizations are in Sherbrooke, and they agreed to work with us. The first meeting of that dialogue took place on October 18. This meeting provided an opportunity to present each of the partners, of course, to present the research project and the role of each participant, as well as to take a first step toward a real conversation about quantum technology. The meeting was facilitated, and this is one of the keys to success, was facilitated by the project coordinator, whose role is to act as a translator between expert and non-expert participants. The next meeting is scheduled for the end of November, in a couple of weeks, and will be used to present the scientific and governmental literature on the anticipated impact of quantum technology in preparing for the scenario building process that will begin at the third meeting. Meeting will should be take place in January 24 and continue over the 3 years of the research project funding. The first observation of this meeting was the important interest showed by all the partners, whatever their backgrounds, revealing the need for information, but more than that, for consideration of the variety of concern from all the group present. The second was our translator's observation of what he named the gap between the expert, especially from industry, and the other actors involved. I think it will be very rich and stimulating to follow the evolution of this dialogue and the ability of the actor to anticipate the technological spin-off and the follow-up to be given in terms of responsible research, innovation, and scientific advice. The research project also includes 2 other dialogues, a national level dialogue that will start in spring 24, and a dialogue with researchers and developers to discuss their individual practices to responsible research and development. This last dialogue is starting this month with 3 professors, 3 PhD students, and 3 entrepreneurs from the region of Sherbrooke. Thank you for your time. I think I'm good with the 8 minutes, right? Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, I'd like to hear from them.
Thank you. So any questions? Okay, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're gonna move to our last speaker, Dr. Mika Chakiva. She's an assistant professor in the School of Biomedical Engineering in the University of British Columbia. And her talk is about the future of personalized medicine, developing a computer-based simulator of human life to predict and develop cell therapies. Welcome.
Thanks so much for that kind invitation, introduction, and I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to join you today. So I'm an academic researcher. I have a research lab that focuses on engineering stem cells for developing cell therapies, and I'm based out of the University of British Columbia. And today I'll be telling you about a new international initiative that I co-founded and I'm co-running with some colleagues around the goal of creating a computational simulator, so a computer-based simulator that captures how our human bodies grew during embryonic development. And in order to understand why doing this activity could be important for our ability to develop cell therapies for treating disease, I wanted to kind of just orient us a bit to how our bodies came to be. So we all started from this single cell, this fertilized egg that was formed when the egg and sperm met at our conception. And this now one cell had to go on to produce our entire human body, right? So that means that that one cell had to undergo a series of divisions producing progeny, and that eventually those progeny had to organize themselves and decide which parts of our body to produce. About a week into our development, we're at this so-called blastocyst stage. And this is a really critical point because some of the cells in the embryo have now decided to go to the outside, and these will go on to produce the tissues that support our growth, like placenta and umbilical cord. And other cells stay in the middle of the embryo, and these red cells, or cells that I've colored red here in the image, go on to produce our bodies. So they will produce all the cell types, all the tissues in our bodies. And for this reason, they're a special kind of cell called the stem cell. And in fact, a specific kind of stem cell, a pluripotent stem cell. Potent is referring to their potential, and the prefix pluri means many. So they have many potential, and that is referring to their ability to give rise to all the tissues and cell types of our body. So that's the ultimate defining feature of a pluripotent stem cell. It's able to self-renew, so give rise to copies of itself theoretically indefinitely. And it can then differentiate and give rise to all of the more than 200 specialized cell types of our body. And these are the cells that actually perform functions like brain cells or blood cells or beta cells of our pancreas. And so for this reason, the fact that we could actually mass produce these pluripotent stem cells in bioreactors and manufacturing pipelines, but that we can also turn them into cells and tissues that are useful for transplanting into our body. For this reason, stem cells are thought of as a powerful substrate for regenerative medicine. There's a number of clinical trials that are underway that are turning these pluripotent stem cells into cells like beta cells, for example. Beta cells are insulin-producing cells of the pancreas, and these are now being transplanted into diabetes patients in an attempt to restore the function of their pancreas so that they could produce insulin and function normally. And so there's a number of these kinds of regenerative medicine cell therapies that are in the pipeline. And what's another cool feature or another important finding that came out in 2006 was this observation that we actually don't need embryos in order to get pluripotent stem cells. So yes, we could extract these pluripotent stem cells from the inner cell mass, this kind of inner region of these early stage embryos, but actually we don't need to. We can actually take patients' own cells, like their skin cells, and we can genetically engineer them so that we revert them back to a stem cell state, and they become induced to become a pluripotent stem cell, and they behave just like an embryonic stem cell would. They can give rise to all the cell types in the body and can be mass produced. And this is a discovery that was found in 2006 and was the fastest turnaround time for a Nobel Prize 6 years later, and really shows that, you know, now we have this ability to derive these pluripotent stem cells and use them for cell therapies. So what's the challenge here? Well, in our international initiative is really trying to make stem cells and all of their derivatives an accessible, engineerable substrate. And in order to do that, we think it's important to be developing computational tools that simulate the behavior of these cells that we grow in a dish, but also their behavior in the embryo. And ultimately, we think that if we can understand all of the rules that govern the behaviors of these cells, whether they grow or differentiate to give rise to our cells and tissues in the body, then we've really got the holy grail, and we can engineer these cells in manufacturing pipelines very robustly. And some of the sort of inspiration for this came from looking at other engineering fields, traditional fields like mechanical or electrical engineering that have developed these powerful computational simulation platforms for simulating complex systems. And these really enabled the boom, like the computer boom, right, that happened within our lifetimes. And we saw these increasingly complicated computer-based systems emerging and robotics emerging. This was all enabled because we were able to distill the rules that govern these robotic systems into these computer platforms. And then we could simulate and engineer increasingly complicated versions of these systems. And we think that if we do this for cells, and in fact, the stem cells that then go on to produce our bodies, then we can imagine simulating engineered systems for regenerative medicine. So we can actually understand not only how our own bodies developed during the embryonic development process, which is of course really powerful from a biological perspective and a basic science perspective, but we also think that this computational simulation platform could become a powerful tool in the regenerative medicine manufacturing world, right? Where we could predict exactly how to grow and perturb these cells so that we can mass produce them, make quantities that are relevant for the aging Canadian population, and to create these cells with high quality to serve patients. And so to do this, we realize this is a very ambitious goal. And so one of the first things that we've done as part of the consortium, this Virtual Human Development Consortium, is we've seeded its members from both experimental research labs as well as theoretical labs. So mathematicians, computational biologists, theoreticians that could help us develop a computational simulator. And by marrying about half of our members being experimental and half of them being theoretical, we're really excited to engage in these so-called experiment to theory cycles, where labs like mine that develop data and conduct experiments in the lab with stem cells and their derivatives could then use this data to feed the computational models that are being developed by our theoretical colleagues or theoretician colleagues. And then those theoreticians, as they develop this computational simulator, can generate predictions about our stem cells that we can go into the lab and engineer and perturb and see if that's true. And in engaging in these cycles, we think that we can make a computational simulator within our lifetimes that could capture the whole development process and can be used for engineering applications. And a reason that I think this is of a particular interest to Canadians and Canadian research is that this is building on the legacy of Canadian stem cell research that began with the discovery of the first stem cell. So the first kind of stem cell that was discovered was actually here in Canada back in 1961 by doctors Till and McCullough, who were a team of biophysicists and hematologists that together discovered the blood stem cell. And you can actually see their statues outside of Science World here in Vancouver, but also outside of the Mars Discovery District in Toronto. So with that, I just wanted to acknowledge our sponsors so far. We've got some support from the Stem Cell Network as well as Medicine by Design that have allowed our network of experts to come together through annual meetings, as well as to seed our new website, which you're definitely welcome to check out. It's virtualhumandevelopment.org. And if you have any further questions or points of discussion, you're welcome to email me, and I kind of put that up there for you. Thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions from the audience? Okay, thank you. Okay, we just finished the section for today, so we wanna thank you for attending. And also we wanna thank all the amazing speakers for their time and their presentations. We encourage you to stay tuned for future pre-conferences events and check the CSPC website and social media for details. We will be launching the poll and we ask you to please help us with it. Thank you very much.